here at Intuit. Typically, I'm a web developer, and I originally got put on a web development team, but recently I've been dipping my toes in backend, so trying to become a full stack developer. But most of what I've done with my team, my front-end team, is React Native. So we've switched tech stacks multiple times, and we're basically building a framework for TurboTax to be moved over from classic like Pascal, really old coding. So we're building our new semantic framework on React and React Native, and we're accomplishing web, iOS, and Android with those three. So we recently switched over at the start of this year. So my experience in React Native is about 10 months. But in that time, we've had some cool, interesting challenges. And the cool thing about React Native is a lot of the problems aren't solved yet. So you'll go do the typical glue your problem, Stack Overflow your problem, and you realize the answer is not there, and you need to go and like ask the developers, or you need to go through and do the source code. So not to scare you, obviously it's not like an everyday problem. Most of the stuff's pretty polished. It's a pretty popular repo at this point, but that is really encouraging and really fun to work on, I think. So, getting into animations, a lot of the things that I do on my team are animations. Personally, I just find animations to be really fun. I did a lot of web animations before I moved on to this team, so the concept of animations is pretty comfortable to me. In this presentation, I'm going to run through how like some basic CSS animations work and then compare them to React Native animations, and we're going to see that they are literally the exact same thing. So let's get started. Alright, so I'm kind of assuming here we have more of a web development crowd than a React Native crowd, but show of hands, you guys web developers at all? Do web development? Okay, awesome. Guess right. So in CSS, the step one to creating an animation is kind of defining the CSS animatable properties in it, and that's the transition property. This is kind of the longhand writing. You can do this all in like one line, which is nice about CSS, but what this is basically just saying is I'm at 0, 0 in my transform translate origin, and if I start moving along that origin, start doing this transition property. And that's easy, meaning do the transition over 2 seconds, wait 1 second before doing the transition, that kind of thing. Step two to this is we're going to create the actual component that we're going to animate in CSS. I'm just going to write a div, give it a class, and we're just going to pull that class in later. So step three, this animation is just going to start when the DOM is rendered. So window on load, get the class name. I think I actually switched the class name here. Yeah, it should be slide in. So get the class name and then move its transform property to 200 in the X direction. So it's going to move it 200 pixels that way, and it's going to do it over 2 seconds. It's going to wait a second, and it's going to do it with the timing function of ease in. So that's a basic CSS animation. You can do most of this actually just in CSS, but to each their own. So in React Native, we're going to follow those same steps. It's going to be a little more complicated on the syntax, but I promise you, like conceptually, it's really no different. So we're going to use the core animated library here for animations in CSS. There's a few animation libraries for React Native that are starting up, but I thought of, so the library's called Animated. I tried them out probably like 5 months ago, and at the time this was the most polished and being worked on the most, so I've been working on this one and doing animations here. So first we're going to import the library. We're also going to import the easing library too, so this is just straight from React Native. This is typically, so you're just going to extend the component, make a class sliding box. You can do this in React or React Native. When you extend the component, you get this nice syntactical sugar of a constructor, because JavaScript's going more object-oriented, and we're going to define this animation property. So this is the exact same thing as that CSS transition thing we're doing. So what this is doing is give me a class variable, and then set it to a timing function from that animated library. we're going to take this state that we later create down here, which starts at a 0, 0. We're going to move it to 200, 0 over 2 seconds. Wait a second and do an easing curve. So the 2000s in milliseconds, the two parameters to that timing function is the variable you want to interpolate, you want to like animate, and then the parameters, and that's what that 2-value duration delay and easing are. And we'll go over the different animation functions later. So that's how you get it kind of started. Then in your render function for your component, because React and React Native classes have a render function, and this is what's going to get re-rendered every time the state changes. What's cool about these animation properties, right? So on the previous slide, we returned this this state. So this is a state variable, but it's a specific animated state variable. And what's cool about these is they're going to self-contain re-render. So what that means is you can have other stuff going on up here. You could be returning other components. Say you have like a view down here. That state variable, when it's changing, it's just going to affect what it touches. So that helps performance and helps not affect everything when you're trying to go from like 0 to 1 over like 0.01 increments, because you want to re-render everything. So we have this variable. We are going to use the API get translate transform. That's just going to grab, secretly, magically grab that that state variable and just grab those the interpolated value. So that's the first parameter here that's going the 2-value to x200. So it's just going to grab that and it's going to take in a nice, pretty syntax, and you can just apply it to the style. So that's just a shorthand, basically. But what you can do here in the style is you can just say like opacity equals this dot state dot slide or something. And if it's going to go from 0 to 1, your opacity is going to fade from 0 to 1. So just stuff like that. A certain amount of these have these like fancy little syntaxes. So this is nice. Returns between state variable. Something to note here, you have to put this animated.view in front of this. This is typically just like a view, like what Brad was talking about, one of those it's basically just a div for React Native. We need to prefix it with this animate.view so it knows to just render this component. Out of the box, we have animated view, animated text, and animated image, but we also have a create animated component where we can just make anything an animated component. So anything can animate, any custom component you create, you can make that specific one animate. So limitations are not there. And then step 3, we're just going to start the animation. So we started the CSS animation when the DOM loaded. We're going to start this animation when the DOM loads again. So component did mount. The lifetime or the life cycle of these component functions is this one is after the render function. So we're going to render that DOM, that animated DOM, and then we're just going to start the animation. You just go to that specific animated or animation. So animated.timing, and you just do .start on it, and that just starts the animation. If you wanted to do this per an event or something, you could just do it on like a button callback or wherever you want it. I'm just going to render the animation right when it starts. So I actually don't have an example of the animation that we've been talking about for 10 minutes, but I promise you it's going to be the same thing. And we're going to go through some animation demos at the end so you can actually see that I'm not just making these up. They do work. So syntactically there's a little more to it, but the steps are exactly the same. Conceptually, it's really no different. The learning curve is super small. There's a few syntactical gotchas, but after that, you're good. So, now I'm going to talk about animation functions. So this is like that animated.timing. So this is like your typical bare bones CSS animation. It's just like, that wasn't it, but it's just go to a certain thing. Do a certain thing with a certain easing. You can put a delay on it. You can specify how long it takes. You're just going to go there. Simple animation. That's basically how CSS animations work. Next up, we have Spring. This one takes a lot of parameters, but all of these are defaults. So like pretty much all from 2-value or everything under 2-value is all set to a default. So you don't have to mess with that. You'll get this behavior right out of the bat. But if you wanted to like modify it, change the speed, change the tension. It gives you all these things. This little spring is apparently mapped to the iOS origami library, if you know anything about that, but that's how, pretty sure that's how like Tinder does its cool little shooty animations and like cool little kind of reflex to your fingers slide natural animations happen. And then the last timing function we have is decay, and this one works really well with if you're gonna like flick an item and you want it to kind of have that deceleration. That's lowercase, by the way. So it's just kind of slow down. So I think in this example, the deacceleration was like 0.98. So just under 1, it's just gonna barely slow down. So those are timing functions. With those timing functions, we can compose these kind of like logic gates for the animations. So first up, we have sequence. This is super straightforward. It's one parameter is an array of those timing functions. So we're going to go to 100, then we're going to go back to 0. And it's just going to do that first timing animation, and when that's completely done, 200 seconds, then it's going to do the next one. Next up, we have the parallel function. This is the opposite. We're going to do these exact same things at the exact same time. So this animation is going to finish in 200 seconds, right? Two 200-second animations at the same time is going to be 200 seconds. Two 200 animations sequentially is going to be 400 milliseconds, right? And then a little more complicated, we have anime.stagger. I just saw this on the docs the other day, actually, so I feel like they snuck it in recently, but this basically just puts a delay in as the first parameter in between the functions. So it'll wait 100 milliseconds before starting off each function in the array. So it's going to do an animated timing for 200 seconds. It's going to wait 100 milliseconds, and then it's going to start that second one for, again, 200 milliseconds. I have a cool little demo at the end showing how you can do this with a bunch of things and make some cool stuff. And then the next one is just the delay. This is kind of one you just throw in the sequence. It just takes one parameter, and that's just the time you want to delay in milliseconds. Obviously, if you're paying attention closely, you could just do animated timing with the delay parameter 500. But in certain cases, when you have these like huge sequential functions and these huge parallel functions, it's nice to just throw in a little delay here and there. It also makes readability a little easier. So yeah, that is basic composition of functions. Those are the timing functions, and that's how the timing functions kind of work. Yeah, so I'm going to run through some examples right now. I know I kind of sped through this, but we can hit some questions at the end, and I can clarify any of your concerns. So this, can I blow it up at all? So this is a little demo app I made just to showcase some animations. We'll start out with this one. So Rainbow Stagger, this is going to use that stagger function, and it's just going to render a bunch of squares. And it's going to do it every 10 milliseconds. It's going to render a new square. And each square is going to change value and color. It's all based on one state animation variable. So I just have one variable going from 0 to 1. And based on that, I'm interpolating the color, I'm interpolating the render time, and the render position, all based on that. So that was a cool little rainbow guy. This animation I stole off some website, but it's just a simple drag and rotate as you drag. I also added a little color interpolation to it, so you go all the way to 0, or it's going to go purple. Oops. You go all the way to 1, it's going to go to red. And if you move it along the x-axis, it's going to rotate. So this is useful when you introduce kind of that, what's it called? The decay timing function. So if you decay function, you can give it like some velocity also. So if I flick this, you can pick up like the velocity in which you flicked it and then like deaccelerate it if you want like a nice little animation like that. If your app involves some kind of interaction with the user, you can do things like that. Here's those same timing functions I was showing. So just to do it without it being super slow, here's the spring. So here's the timing one, normal, straightforward. Spring function, gonna get that natural bounce to it. I'm not modifying any of the parameters here. I think the tension's set to like 7 and the springiness to 5 or something like that. And here's that decay function. So if you paired this function with that square, you could kind of have like a flick and like deaccelerate type thing, which is super popular for apps these days. Here's a little submit button that I kind of stole off of Dribble. It's like a little designer website, but I just made up something that they thought was fancy. So this is using a plugin called Circular Progress Bar. So right when this loads, you can kind of hook it up to some kind of asynchronous data source, and the little circular dongle thingamajigger would react to that. So this is kind of like a nice interactive button you can present to your users. And then here's a little logo I did for my team. We're called Fuego.js, by the way. That's the framework I work on. So here's a little animation. Kind of dark. But yeah, so this just uses like 100 little circles, and as you can see, like I'm rendering 100 circle components, changing their colors, changing their size, changing their position, and we're not really hitting any performances. It's going pretty smoothly. Yeah. So what I found in this little animation sandbox is, I mean, you can get to a point where you're going to see some noticeable lag, but you know, for 100 little components, it's actually not too bad. And then yeah, so I have a few more demonstrations of like stuff I've done in my work. So animations for that I'll just run through real quickly. But yeah, let me just set it up because it's on my phone. And in the meantime, does anyone have any questions that they'd like to hit me with right now before you forget from confusion the information I blasted you with?
So it looked like you were.
What I thought I saw is that you sort of had sort of like an inline style. You put the animation information into the component.
Yeah.
So like if I was building this as regular React, I would have a component that could use different styles, and I think the animation stuff would be in like the CSS style sheet. Does that sound correct too?
Yeah, so you're saying for like a CSS animation?
Yeah.
So most of the CSS animations that I've always done, I just throw like, these transition properties in the CSS, just like up here with the transition property usually.
I was just concerned about like, you know, you put that stuff into the component, it's sort of like tightly coupled in there. Whereas if like you could just change styles on the fly if it was a web component. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think this kind of hits on like what you were saying as a question in the previous round. So with React Native, there's not really, so it doesn't use styles, or it doesn't use CSS, right? You kind of create these objects and you tie them to your component, so you get this encapsulation. And that component, or that object, that style object, it's just like a normal object, and it just has like JavaScript keys that map to CSS animations. So in that sense, none of your styles are actually in CSS anyway, so it just kind of couples it with. You can kind of put it in like the bottom section of your file maybe, or like organize it specifically. What I like to do is I like to set functions or class variables like this to like what the animation is doing. Like this dot slide in equals the slide in animation, and then you just use the slide in wherever you want. And then you can pass like parameters to slide in or something, you know, if you want to like extend it out a little bit.
Yeah, just a crazy question, but do you think you could like have like, I don't know, a hash table of them with names, and you could look them up and they could just apply any kind of thing you want to whatever components?
Yeah, you know, it's programming, anything's possible. I would more extend these functions to have like, so if you're using a lot of animated timing functions and all you're really doing is changing the duration, I would just make like a function like slide in that takes like a duration property, and then you just propagate it like that. And then maybe you can fill that with your hash map. You can use a hash map for like maybe these animation variables, but you know, however you want to get that.
Okay. That was really cool. Thanks a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing your other demos.
Yeah, no problem. So let me just load this up real quick. This is what I've been working on for work, and this is a get to know me flow. So one second. And sorry for the people watching at home, apparently I'm doing this demo off of my iPhone, like actual iPhone, so apparently that doesn't hook up to the HDMI, so I think you're just seeing my lovely face, so I'm sorry. Get to know me. So this is kind of that same Tinder-like paradigm where we're going to swipe a card and we're going to use a decay to kind of track my velocity. So if I'm slow, it's going to be slower. And if it's, can't be future date. If it's really fast, it's just going to like launch off the page. And I clamp those to like really relative values, so it's hard to tell, but it's kind of, you can kind of tell. But yeah, this is basically just using some position absolute squares with, all of them are just animated, and we're just going to do a quick little animated decay based on like wherever the element is. So you don't really get a touch target with the thing, but it's just tracking my finger, and then a flick off. Validation. Flick off is going to launch it off. So yeah, this is one of the more complicated animations I've been working on for work. This was one of the ones that I did a couple months ago, and there wasn't much references to stuff, but even if you're like kind of trailblazing in the animation world, like anything's doable. It's all basically CSS animations at the end of the day, so anything you can see being done on web is absolutely doable on React Native. There's no limitations. Cool. So any questions?
I'm wondering if you use any like prototyping tools for this stuff before you build it out.
Prototyping tools?
Yeah, like do you go straight into building something like this, or do you kind of plan it out ahead of time?
So I just kind of head first, that get to know me Tinder swipe card thing. I started off with a plugin that actually did that, and then I realized that the plugin didn't do exactly what I wanted to, and I just kind of end up absorbing the plugin and just like using it. So I don't know, I just kind of take it, what makes sense for step one, step two. I don't know, I'm not much of a plan guy with code. I just kind of try some things out. So like that dribble one, that little button. So I saw like the full animation on Dribble. It was just like a GIF looping of like this really nice animation. I kind of just like, okay, what are they doing first? Okay, it's just like a normal button. Okay, then they fill. Okay, then they shrink. Okay, then they do progress bar. And I just kind of went at it like that. So, yeah.
You briefly mentioned being able to create an animatable view from any component of that. Is it really as simple as just calling a wrapper function, or do you have to write something?
That man right in front of you could probably speak to it better. I've never actually used it, but apparently I'm pretty sure it is actually that simple. I think it takes the one parameter of that component, and I don't think the animated core library is actually doing that much to the components. The only thing that I've noticed it do is not re-render everything else. So I think it just kind of links those two things somehow.